Ah, there we go. All right, let's try that. I bet we can hear. I bet people can hear me now. Perfect. Okay. All right, so I think audio's working. Let's make sure it's working on the live stream. That's looking good. Perfect. All right, start here in a couple moments. How's everybody doing today? All right, let's see. All right, let's get started. Okay. All right, let's start rolling. All right, again, welcome everybody. This will be part 2 for our adventure series. Thanks for everybody coming out. I'd like to mention at the start of this game, I want to thank JD for hosting me and helping me out supporting these Unreal workshops. Again, thank you for all coming out and supporting it. So we're getting a good amount of followers with this, which is making me very happy, and hopefully we'll just keep these things rolling. So today should be a very fun talk. We're going to effectively finish up some of the customization with our little platforms, create a little bit of a actual event-driven platform, so when I could step on it, then it moves up and down, or even hook it up to a button. We'll also make a door today, so we're going to start building new rooms and start making this look more like an adventure game. Other things I'd like to announce, again, want to just make an announcement is that, again, if you're a student developer in Chicago, I highly recommend going to reach out and join the JD student organization. The link's in my Twitch panel below, so follow through it and by all means join. A lot of great people there. Also, if you are a DePaul student right now and looking to get more involved with the game development community, the JDE is looking for new board members. The board members, again, their duties effectively is to help run the JDE, host events like game jams, work closely with IGDA, and again, do a whole bunch of very cool things. If you're interested, please reach out to the JDE. They're looking for new members. Aside from that, I think we're ready to go. Let's get started. Okay. So, fun stuff today. All right. So, I'll give a couple minutes while you're downloading that in my Twitch stream down below, let me show you. Just as a reminder, all the assets in the current project I'm working from each day will be up here in my panel below. So if you take a look, there'll be a download link. If you follow it, I'll effectively keep numbering them. We're in effectively series number 2 today. So if you download that project, you can work from the exact project I am right now. Now, you don't have to necessarily, but if you want to basically keep up as the series goes along, I'll keep dropping them there. So I'll keep them in that drive as long as I can. I might have to move some stuff when I run out of memory, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Okay, so for today's talk, we're going to go over a little bit more about blueprints. We're going to go a little bit more about variables. And we're going to do this by creating a behavior, because we want to create behaviors. We want to create a game, right? That's what we want to do. And again, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. The moderators will reach out to me and make sure that I'm paying attention to the questions. So let's take a look today. So you can download this and watch while I go over a couple of things that we went over. So I'm going to do like a little bit of review. So what we went over today, so let me bring up, so we created a blueprint called the moving platform. Now, if you remember from last week, blueprints are the ways that we create behaviors in Unreal. So besides just placing objects in scene, adding materials, lighting, stuff like that, anything that's going to be effectively active and again interactive in our game and effectively allows us to challenge our player. They're all going to be driven through blueprints. Blueprints is your way of creating behavior in Unreal, and it actually controls pretty much most of the systems in Unreal. So once you kind of get the hang of it, you'll be able to go jump to all the other modules fairly easily. So let's talk about this one. Our goal here was try to make a moving platform that goes up and down. Now, here's what we've created so far. So in this moving platform, I went over to the viewport. This will give us a visual representation of what our object currently looks like. So right now, it's more or less just a box. Now, the other things, I've added a couple other things which we'll get to. I've added a bots collision, which we'll come back to that. We're not quite there yet. I've also added our 2 points, which I just renamed them this week and call them point 1 and point 2. Now, the other cool part here, I've also added another component to each of these points, and these are billboards. Now, before I get to that, I'm going to discuss, if you notice that for each one of these components, so if you remember from the previous talks, all actors are made up components. So Unreal is a component-driven system. So just like if you have a car, the car is made up of different pieces. Put all the pieces together, you get a car. Same thing with Unreal. Put a whole bunch of different pieces together, we get whatever blueprint we're trying to create. So in this component, besides adding components here, there's also a thing called hierarchy, which is in our first, the only part, there's actually a lot of things that come with that term, but the only part we care about right now is effectively translation between parent to child. So if you notice here, there's a little kind of like drop down, that's the point, and you see a little billboard object inside of it. Now we'll talk about the billboard here in a second, but it's actually another component. But I've actually had this component childed to this one. So let's say if I added a new component, you don't need to do that right now, but let's say if I add a new one, let's say if I did it correctly, it attaches here. All these four components right here are a child of the root. The root is basically the root component of this object. So, like for example, your axle again is the tire would be a child of the axle, or effectively the seatbelt is a child of the steering wheel, or actually even a more appropriate one. Again, if you take a look at me right now, imagine me as an entire game object, an actor. Now, me as a whole one is the game object, but many pieces of me make up that said game object. So let me put it in this window so you can see for a second. So what I mean by hierarchy is this, is that me as a person is a game object, but let's consider my arm. My arm is a child of the full game object, which is me. Now, it does mean a lot of different things, but one of the things that we're going to talk today is effectively when it deals with movement. Now, since this is a child of me, I can move my arm, and it moves moves as normal. Effectively, it's hinged to a joint, but it's moving as normal. Now, it is a child of the full person of me. Now, if the full person of me moves, so if I move left or right, the arm moves with it. But I can move the arm independently of my whole body. That's the same relationship that goes on with hierarchy in video games. That a child can move independently, but if the parent moves, the child's going to move. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. So I'll give you an example of this. So I'm going to put this cube in it, so now this thing looks like here, but I'm going to go back to this world object. Now, if I select the whole platform as a whole, and I move them, everything moves with it. But if I go inside the actual object, and let's say I just select that cube I created, and move them, the whole object doesn't move, just him. Because the cube is a child of the whole object. So that's what's going on here. So children can move independently of the parent, but if the parent moves, the child's going to move. That's what's going on here. So I've created these points that have these little billboards in them. These billboards are just these little icons you're seeing here. So I can visually see it in my editor, but not in the game. Now, if you notice, this billboard is actually independent of the point itself, which I don't want to do. So I'm going to change that back to 0. I want this guy in line with its parent. But I can move this guy independently of the entire object, which is what I want. So that's what this little, when you open these up, that's why you see these little indentations. If you put them, if you effectively create a cube, let's say if I create a cube here, if he was attached to the root, that he is a child of the root, or I can make him a child of the point. And again, everything trickles down. So if I move the parent, it's going to move the point, which will in turn move the cube. If I move the point, it'll move the cube. But if I move the cube, it'll just move the cube. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. If there's any questions, just drop it in chat and I'll answer them. All right. So let's go back to the... Okay. So all these guys are little children. Oh, did I get a message? No. Okay. So all these guys are little children of the main object. And again, children can have more children. So these billboards are a child of the point. The point is a child of the platform. The point is a child of the default root. So the structure I want here is I want a platform, then a point, and then another point. And I don't want these guys childed to each other because I want them to move independently from each other, but still be part of the same giant object, which is the moving platform. So that's what we're doing here. Now, what that does is that in the scene, I now have a really nifty little handle. So if I grab like point 1, I can now move point 1 around in the scene where I want it. And also, when I run it, I don't actually see it in the scene, which is what I want. So I want to see it in the editor, but not in the scene. And how I do that, if you actually take any object, if you go to any object, let's say this billboard, in the details tab, there's a section called rendering. There's visible and in-game. Visible means whether or not it's visible when the player sees it. Hidden game means that it could be visible. So visible means that it's visible in both the editor and the world. Hidden game means that I can see it in editor, but when the game boots up, it will be invisible. So things to consider. All right, cool. Now, let's go back to the moving platform, and we're going to do this step by step again. So our goal is to get this platform to move up and down between these 2 points. And there's several different ways we do it. We're going to see 2 today. We're going to do it through just pure variables, and we're also going to do one through a timeline, which I'll show you how that works. Both are perfectly valid depending on what you want to do. So the first one is that we're going to do set of events. So I'm going to, let me get my whiteboard. So give me 1 second. Okay. So this is what we're going to do with this little platform here. We're going to execute the following commands. Well, basically the following series of events. The first event is that we're going to create the direction I want to move. So if you remember from last time, I said that the 2 things that you want to do while developing, again, while you're creating behavior is ask these 2 questions. 1, what am I trying to do and what do I have? So this is what I'm trying to do. You got to explain it as if you were the computer. Computers don't make intuitive leaps. You got to be very specific. So I'm going to create a direction I want to move, then move the platform in that direction. Then 3, check if I've reached a point. Check if I reached point. Forget my awful handwriting. And then finally, I'm going to, if I have reached it, I'll just abbreviate, if reached, then flip directions. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to check to find the direction I want to move the platform, check to see if I've reached the point. If I've reached the point, I flip the direction. So those are the series of events that we're going to do. Okay. All right, let's do it. So how we're going to do this is that we're going to do it through a sequence of events. So first one I want you to do is I want you to drag off the event tick because we're going to do this in update. We're going to do this in update, and I want you to drag off and type the word sequence, S-E-Q-U-N-U-E-N-C-E. So all sequences, it's just effectively do this, then this, then this, then this, then this. Just like you saw how I structured on the whiteboard. So we're going to do the exact same thing here. So step one is that we're going to create the direction that we want to go. Oops. We want to create the direction we want to go. So first thing we need to do is that how do we create the direction? Well, if you remember from last week, how we create our direction is that we're going to use a simple formula. Effectively, let me bring up my whiteboard again. So to find direction, you do the following. If you know 2 points, effectively where you are and where you want to go, you can create the direction. And all you have to do is just take the point of where you want to go, subtract that point from where you're at. That will create a vector. A vector is a direction. That's all you have to do. So the formula looks like as follows. Vector, which is my direction, I subtract where I want to go, which is we'll call point 2, and subtract it from where I'm at. We'll say target and origin. You get those 2 points, you can then create a vector. That little function right there, if you get used to it and remember it pretty well, life gets really easy when it comes to developing behaviors. So, I first need to get where I want to go, which in this case, I think I'm heading towards point 1. I am. So let's go to viewport, go to moving platform, we're going to go to event graph. We're going to first get point 1, I'm going to drag him over here because I want to know where he is currently at. I want to get his world location. Get world location. So I want to know where he's at. I also want to know where the platform is at. Get world location. So if I get those 2 points, this is where my target and this is where I'm currently at. So then you subtract them vector by vector. Now this has created our direction. So I've already created a variable here, but if you are working on your own project, you're going to click variable, call it direction, and make it of type vector, the yellow one. If you downloaded my project, it should already be there. I'm going to drag out direction, do set, and now I can set the direction I want to go. In this case, and again, this is going to be a variable. Now, if you remember from last week, variables are just containers. They contain data that I want to use. This little guy, so it's basically the same idea as my cup. My cup is a variable. What's currently holding inside of it is the value, which is water. So I could fill this with water, orange juice, soda, whatever I want, coffee. But this guy is the variable. The cup is the variable. What it's currently holding is what's inside the cup. So in this case, direction is a variable, and it will hold the position, or in this case, sorry, the direction I want to go. In this case, I will take these two and I want it to definitely use that as my direction. Now, we're going to change this add one little thing here, which you, again, some might have seen this before, some not. I want you to drag out the yellow line here and type in the word normalize. Now, what normalization does, so this is effectively a thing for vectors, is that right now, again, vectors have a direction where you want to go. They also have a length, which is how fast you're going to move to that point. Now, when I first subtract these two guys, how fast this is going to move, or the length, is actually the entire distance between these 2 points. Which will mean, if I use this direction as it stands right now, in one frame, he'll immediately basically zip right to the point. Which I don't want to do. I want him to move slowly towards it, instead of just zapping right towards the point. That's where this normalize comes into play. What normalize will do is that it will take the same direction that you want to go, but shrink down the speed or the length down to 1. So it's very, very small. And from there, we'll control how big we want that distance. But we're going to use this for now. So this is now how I want you to structure it. Oops, sorry. I'll give you a couple seconds to line it up like I do. Now, once you have that complete, you're going to drag from sequence 0, this is then 0, and tag it on direction. I'm going to move this a little bit above so you can kind of see it. So this is what it's going to look like. Alright, from here, I'm also going to show you another thing you can do with blueprints, which is very helpful. You can add like little comments for effectively to remember what you did here. So I'm going to add a comment here. So what I want you to do is like left click and drag all these, effectively just these nodes right here, and then hit the C key. C as in cat. When you do that, you'll get a little bubble. A little bubble where you can effectively write some notes. Like for example, this is create the direction I want to go. I'll hit compile, save, and boom. There we go. A little smaller, but now I effectively have a little comment to remember what these nodes actually do. Now that we have that, we are now going to move the object. So the target thing I want to move is the platform. Okay, so I will get the platform. I will drag him off. Now, if we learned from last week, we have two ones we can use: add actor location or add actor offset. Both will work. It's set actor location. So here's one. I'll show both. Actor. Oh, sorry. It's actually world. Sorry. Set world location. And there's also set world offset. These are the two flavors. Now, there's also another one. I also will mention this right now. Actor location. So these actually look very similar, but now I have to explain why they look different. So here's a couple flavors I need to show you. Mainly, let's just discuss the difference between these two. There's actually two types of locations: set actor location and then set world location. What set actor location is that this will set the location of this entire object. That includes the platform, the points, everything that's a part of this object. When I do set world location, I'm going to set a specific component inside this actor to a world location. In this case, it's what this thing is connected to. So in this case, I'm setting the world location of this platform. If I use this one, this would set the actor location of the entire object. I only want to move the platform and nothing else that's a part of this object. So I hope that makes sense. Bring my mic back a little bit. Apologize for that. So I just want this. And then offset, essentially there's a pair for each one. Offset, this will set to a literal location that's like snap to here. This one says, all right, instead of setting location, what direction do you want to move it? So this offsets it. So essentially given his current location, you give a vector here, it will move it by that vector, which is what we're going to use here. So I don't want to literally set his location, I want to move him. So what do I want to move it by? Well, that's where direction comes into play. So I'm going to bring direction back out and set it. So if you notice here, in this section I created the direction, and then in this section I moved them. And then I'll hit this. So this is my goal, I want to move them. Now, if we run this right now, it's going to move, but super, super slow. Let's at least take a look, see if we can even see it. Oh, actually, you know what? Actually, it will move faster than I think because we're not using delta time yet. So it starts moving. So I'm also going to give you a little extra thing here. You don't have to use it for now, just for practice, but I'm going to show you a couple other things here. So the next thing I want to do is actually be able to control the speed of this variable. So I want to control how fast that platform moves. So you can do this is that with any vector you have, you can multiply it by a number. So let's say the direction I want to move is up, which in this case would be 0, 0, 1. So if you remember from last week, you have a location. X is this direction. So if you look at a gizmo of an object, X is that direction. Y is that direction. Z is this direction. So the direction I want to move is just up right now, more or less. So I'm not going to move anything in the red direction, which is X, so that would be a 0. I'm not moving anything in the Y, which would be a 0. But I want to move up, so I will have this as a 1. So it would be 0, 0, 1. Now, if you have that direction, which is 0, 0, 1, you can then multiply it by a number. So if you have 0, 0, 1, and let's say I multiply it by 2, you would multiply them individually. So 0 times 2 is 0, 0 times 2 is 0, 1 times 2 is 2. So the direction here would go from 0, 0, 1 to 0, 0, 2. So any number I multiply this by, it becomes that much bigger or smaller, depending if it's a smaller number. So I'm going to do vector times float. Float means I have a decimal. So now I'm going to take my vector multiplied by some number, which then will control my speed. I can do this, then I'm going to take the speed variable, which again, if you download my project, it should be here. Otherwise, you can create it. You basically create a variable called speed. I have to give it a different name since there's already one of the same name. So speed variable. Then there's a little drop down here. So instead of red, you're going to pick the green one, which is float, which is a number. So I'm going to get rid of this since I already have one. So I'm going to drag speed over. I'm going to get speed, and then attach it here. So direction is multiplied by speed, which is then this is what I want to use. So this little value here is going to control how fast that vector, how big that vector is, which in turn controls how fast it moves. All right, I'm going to give this a comment as well. Move the platform by the direction variable. So I'll give my little hints here so I remember what I'm doing here. Now, here's the cool part. In any variable, there is a little symbol here, which is effectively an I. You can open it or close it. Once you do that, these variables become public, which for right now, what that means is that if I would actually go to the object itself, the moving platform, and look around in its data, sure enough, what I'm going to see, so I need to select moving platform, just moving platform, and boom, there's the speed variable, which I can change to whatever I want. So I could say like maybe 20. Which now if I run it, it's probably going to move super fast, but it moves. Which we'll fix that here in a second. So now you can effectively dial in how fast you want that platform to move. All you have to do is just change the number here. Now I'm going to bring in one side bonus, which again, it's important to know. It's not going to change too much here, but it's important to know, which is this little variable right here that's on event tick. You have a little number here which is called delta seconds. In short, this number contains how long has it been since the last update. Now, give you what this is used for is that right now event tick runs as fast as the computer can run. So another way to think about it is event tick is running as fast as your frame rate of your computer. Which means if your computer runs faster or slower, then this tick would run faster or slower. Okay, pretty cool. Now, why I would want this is that I would want the same experience to happen across any game on any person's machine. If I don't use delta seconds and just stick with event tick, then this guy would move as fast as the computer is running. So a faster computer would actually have a bigger advantage than a slower computer. Now, most projects will effectively try to cap it so it sticks at 30 or 60 FPS, whichever one. But if I just want to make sure that I can avoid that, I can take this delta seconds and I'm going to multiply it by this direction. In doing so, this direction will scale or increase based off your frame rate. So another way to think of it is that when I use this delta seconds, it's going to move by seconds rather than frame rate. So that's maybe an easier way to remember. So using this number, I can move in terms of seconds rather than frame rate, which for a lot of instances is probably very important. So what I'm going to do is after this is done, and then I'm going to multiply it by another float and drag this over here. And then I'll drag this final one into here. Now, if you don't want to drag it over, you can actually even just type out somewhere in the empty space and say get world delta seconds, which will be the same value as this. And you can also keep like this if you don't want to keep all those nasty little lines. But in short, you don't have to add this, but what this is used for is trying to make your movement independent of frame rate, which is important. And make it in terms of seconds. So I want the platform to reach in a certain amount of seconds rather than a certain amount of frames. Now when I run this, the platform will move at a slow speed, but at a controlled speed. So I can now put this, let's say, back at 50, and it should look pretty decent. Okay. Now we're going to add a couple more pieces to finish this off. Is that after we move them, we're going to check to see if we got close to our desired point. Now, this is where this variable comes into play. So, what I want you to do now is take a look inside the variables here. I created another variable here called current target. Now, if you start from scratch, what I did from here is create a new variable, and the type of variable this is of type scene component. Now, why did I pick scene component? Out of all the ones I could pick, why did I do scene component? Well, why I picked scene component is that this variable is going to be the same type as our points, the points that we're traveling to. So this and current target are the same type of variable. So, for example, if you have two float variables or two integer variables, they both hold ints, So they share that in common, but they're two different types. So the same thing's going on here. This is a variable called point1, which is a type scene component. Current target is also a type scene component. I did that on purpose. I want this variable to be the same type as point. The reason why is that I'm going to use this variable to represent which point I'm currently heading towards. So in begin play, I say that current target, I set him to be point 1. I want him to head towards point 1. Which means in this event tick, instead of using point 1, I'm actually going to use current target. And why am I going to do that? Well, after I've actually reached point 1, I'm then going to say current target no longer equals point 1, but it's going to equal point 2 instead. So current target is actually going to flip between which point it is. Because you remember, variables are just containers. It would be the same idea as that if I have a cup, if I had two cups in a hand, I don't have one next to me, but imagine I have another cup before I pour this. I could take whatever's in this cup, water, and pour it into another cup. And now it's in here, which I could then take it and then pour it back. Same idea here. So I'm going to have, instead of get point 1's current location, I'm going to get current target's location. So this could be either point 1 or point 2, depending on what it is. So at the start, it's point 1. But when I get down to here, when I'm going to check the distance, I'm going to see if I'm at the right distance. If so, then I'm going to flip what point he's going to go to. So we're going to go in the sequence. I'm going to add another pin here. So you can do that by effectively hitting this plus button. And now I have another direction. So I do this first, then this, and now I'm going to check to see if I'm close to the target. So I'm going to get current target, and I'm going to get my current position, which is platform. So I will get the world location of the current target. I will get the current world location of the platform. Now, why am I getting both of these? Because, again, I'm going to see, we know the platform is moving towards this target. That's what we're doing here. Which means at some point, the platform's distance between, the distance between the platform and the current target, which aka point 1 for the time being, is going to get super small. At some point, they're going to get more or less right on top of each other. When that event occurs, I'm then going to say that current target's going to be a different point. So I'm going to drag this off and type the word distance, and you'll see one that says vector. So we're checking if the distance between current target and platform is small enough. So I'm going to move these guys a little closer together. That there. Going to check the distance between those two. Then I'm going to see if the distance is actually a small number. Let's say like, I don't know, 10? Could be 1. You can pick what number you want to pick, but I'm going to pick like, let's say 10. If it's right there at 10, then I'm going to check to see. I'm checking to see if this is less than 10. This red one here, if you notice, the colors relate to what type of variable it is. If I bring in two vectors, grab the distance is going to be a number, hence green. Then I'm checking to see if the distance is less than 10, which is a question, which is either true or false. Hence the red, that's giving me a Boolean. So I'm going to check if, I'm going to branch, and check to see if this is true or false. If this is true, then I know that the current target and the platform are super close to each other. I've reached the final destination. If not, I'm not going to do anything. So I'm going to take this then statement, the number 2, and then drag that into the branch. So now it's connected. Now, if you one thing I do to keep these organized, so they try my best not to have them go through each other. I'm going to move this a little back. You can actually double click on one of these lines and create effectively an extra execution, which I usually use it to organize these lines. So if you double click on the line, it creates one of these points. And once I have one of these points, I deleted that, drag that back in, I can then move it around. So I'm trying to keep these things as pretty as possible, because it's very easy with blueprints to get spaghetti code, as they call it, because there's just going to be lines everywhere. all crisscrossing across. Now, here we're checking to see the distance. If the distance is less than 10, true, that means I'm very, very close. So now I know I'm close to the target. So what am I going to do? Well, I would want, in theory, current target now to be equal to 0.2. So I grabbed current target, and then I grabbed 0.2. And then I would want to do that. And then hit true. So once it gets close enough, then current target is now 2. Which means when I get back to this section, this is now 0.2, no longer 0.1, which means the distance is now big again because now he has to travel back down. And if you remember, I'm always trying to get the direction from my target to the platform. So when you saw it, the point was the direction was going up because it was from there to here. So sorry, from here to there. Now that the 0.2 is, now the current target is split down here, now the direction is going to point down because that's where the target's at. Pretty cool. All right, let's just test to make sure it works. So we should see the platform go up and then back down. And then it's going to stop once it hits the bottom because it's not looping right now. Okay. It goes up and it goes down. Now, what we want to do is just add one little letter extra flavor, which is if he was currently heading to 0.1, I want it to head to 0.2, but if he was heading to 0.2, I want to head to 0.1. So we want to basically flip-flop back and forth. Now, there's actually a little flip-flop node you can use on Unreal, but I'm going to do it with a Boolean. So we want to learn our little programming basics. So we can pull that feature off with a Boolean. So what I'm going to do here is I create another Boolean called flip. So it's just type Boolean called flip. Flip will start off as false. And I'm going to check to see if flip is true or false. So I'm going to create another branch. So if I know the distance is less than 10, boom, then I'm going to check to see if flip is true or false. I'm going to break this apart for a second. And I'm going to bring flip out here twice. I'm going to set him twice. What I'm going to do here is that if flip was true, it will now be false. If flip was false, it will now be true. So it's going to flip back and forth. So if flip was false, and again, you just pick which one you want it to be. I will say that 0.2 is, current target's going to be 0.2. Or I'll bring current target back out again. And then bring 0.1 out again. And then boom. So that's the flip back and forth. Again, you can make this a lot shorter, so there's probably in here is like, oh, I can make this a lot shorter. You can definitely can. I'm just doing it long ways, so I explain each step and should make, so I believe the logic makes sense here for effectively new people. Now, if we've done this right now, the platform will keep going up and down forever. Goes up, and then back down. Get on the platform myself. We go up. We go down. Which now it's a basic moving platform, which is great because now I could also do this. I could go back into the moving platform. I could even change one of these points, let's say 0.1, to a different location. And then maybe change the speed as well. So I'll go to speed, changes 100. But now I have a very robust version of moving platform. And I can set exactly where I want to in the scene where I want to go because the logic will remain the same. All right. Any questions? a couple seconds. All right, let's keep rolling. Okay, so now that we've got a little moving platform, we're now going to create a different version just to show you similar behavior but done differently. I'm going to do this with a timeline. So this will be a little bit shorter code but does a little bit different. And we're going to actually use this as an elevator. So the elevator will be, again, the difference between this is that as soon as I step on the platform, it will go up. As soon as I step off, the platform will stop. So how I want you to do this is that find your moving platform blueprint in your content browser. I want you to right-click it. We're going to basically make a duplicate of this blueprint. So I want to keep the moving platform as it works fine, and we can keep it the way it is. I'm going to make a new type. So I want you to right-click moving platform, and we're going to go to Asset Actions. Nope, it's right there. So fourth one down, it says Duplicate. We're just going to start from this one that we have already. We're going to say Duplicate. And we'll say this will be the elevator. Everybody got it? So we're just making a new one. I'm going to drag this guy in here. So this one's going to act like an elevator instead of a moving platform. So this is always going to keep moving no matter what, this one. I'm also going to bring part 1 back over here. Okay, I'm going to keep it about there. Now I'm going to have the elevator do something similar, but this elevator is going to go up and down. I'm going to move point 1 a little bit up. Yeah, right about there seems good. And he's only going to move when I step on the platform. So I'm going to show you two new things here. So once you have that working, we're going to leave moving platform alone. I want you to double click elevator. So we'll bring up the elevator blueprint. Now we're going to do this in stages. So we're going to keep the code that we have here for a second, but we're going to get rid of it here soon when we bring up timeline. But I want to show you a cool little thing. So for a lot of objects, any object more or less with a mesh, again, a mesh usually then comes with a set of physics and collisions attached to it. So if I go to the viewport and go to this cube, if you look in the details section, you also have some settings for physics, which we will get to at one point. We'll talk about physics, but there's also another section called collision. Collision controls what happens as object gets hit by something. And there's a lot of things you can basically check to see if it gets hit on. Now, the one we're going to play with today is called overlap, which means if another actor is overlapping me, which means effectively if you have two objects, use this controller. You have two objects that are more or less intersecting each other. If they intersect, we have an overlap. Overlap are events. Events are things that occur in the scene. Two events we've seen so far is event tick and begin play. These two events occur when the event, so this event occurs when the game starts. This event occurs every single frame. Now I want to use a different one. So the one we're going to use here, so if you go to platform, I'm going to show you two phases of it. You can pick either or. If you go to platform and scroll down to the bottom, you're going to see a whole bunch of little green plus buttons. These little green plus buttons are all the different events you get by default. So you have one for on hit, so if this object gets hit by something, like let's say I shoot it with a projectile. There's also one called begin overlap and end overlap. Now there's a whole bunch of others, which I recommend go playing around with, but we're going to only play with mainly the top three for a while. The one we're going to play with first is begin overlap. This will get called once, and this will get called if something new touches this object. So what I want you to do is, while the platform is selected, hit the plus button. You should see your camera should now zoom to something that looks like this, which I'm going to drag it over here so it's by itself. So this says on component begin overlap. So there's also actor overlap, which is that if it touches any part of this actor, it'll let you know. In this case, I'm only cared about component, because I only want to know when this platform gets hit, not when the entire object gets hit. So I only want to know when this platform gets hit. If this platform gets hit, this little red box will occur. So it basically pops off saying, this event has occurred. Something has hit me. Something, sorry, has overlapped me. What we're going to do is just change one little cool thing here, just to show you what it will do. On event tick, actually we'll do it in this, actually we'll bring it up here. I'm going to make sure I explain perfectly each one. So let's bring it up here near event tick. I'm going to take on an actor begin overlap and then drag into here. So instead, and I'm going to break the link with event tick. So instead of running on this on update, I'm going to run when this thing gets hit. Or, sorry, overlapped. So on begin overlap, I'm going to have you run this entire movement code if you've been overlapped by another actor. I'll hit compile, I'll hit save, just be careful. I'm going to move over. I will hit play. It shouldn't move, but if I touch it, even though it's hard to tell, it moved just slightly. It moved very, very little. Well, actually, let me make sure. Did I even give it a speed? Oh yeah, it does have a speed. It's going to move very, very small. Very, very slowly. The reason why is that this guy only actually gets called once. It gets called only the first moment somebody touches him. So one way we could do this is actually use, instead of using this on update, because right now in order to move I'd have to keep jumping up and down and restarting the trigger over and over again. Instead we're going to use this to turn a boolean on or off. So I'm going to break this link. Bring it down here. And I'm going to create another boolean here. So I've created one for myself, which you can as well. It's called move platform. It's a question. So should I move the platform? Well, if someone has touched me, I'm going to say yes, move the platform. So if something has touched this object, I will set move platform to true. If it's true, then we can move the platform. Which then I'll go back up to event tick. So sorry, I'll give you a moment. So I created a new boolean called move platform. Then on begin overlap, I will then set it. All right. Then up to here, I will then, before event tick runs, I'm going to run a question, which is a branch. If move platform is true, I will then move the platform. So this will occur if at one point somebody touches this object, it then should start moving up, hopefully, if I've set up everything correctly. So now I will then run it, see if I did this thing correctly. I did not. Let me go check, see if it's this box. Let me get rid of the box here for a second. We're going to use the box here in a second, but all right. Overlap events. See if this is occurring. So give me one moment. I'm going to debug my code and see if this is working. Nope, overlap events isn't occurring. So I don't remember off the top of my head. Oh, that's right. We're blocking, not overlapping. So we're going to go to the route that I actually wanted to do this. So we're going to get rid of this one here for a second. So let's delete this one. We're not going to use a platform. We're going to use an actual trigger. So in short, what happened is I'm using this as a block all. I need it as an overlap if I wanted to check for an overlap event. So perfectly fine. We're going to change this here. I'm going to get rid of these two. So I deleted this object. If this object's still there, there was a box object here. If it's still there, go ahead and leave it. Otherwise, add it here. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go to the viewport. I'm going to create an invisible box. Invisible box that if the player touches this box, it will then trigger the whole thing. Because right now, I was just checking to see if it actually touched this. So I'm going to use a box collision. So with the platform selected, go to add component, scroll down and look for a blue object that is called bots collision. Click the add. And I'll keep this as box. Bots is fine. Or We'll call it maybe the trigger. If they touch it, it goes up. Now the trigger is effectively this individual box that you see here. What I'm going to do is actually place this box right above the platform. Make it a little bit bigger. And all the player has to do is walk up and touch it somewhere on the platform, which actually in turn will actually give you far more control, because in theory I don't want the platform to start moving until he's actually on top of the platform, not accidentally touching it. So I could like make it a little smaller. He needs to be standing on the center of the platform to turn this on. Or you could keep it as big as you want, but this little box is going to represent what the player has to touch to start this up. Now, let's double check here. It is overlap, so this will cause an overlap event. So what I want you to do is when we have this trigger, you're going to have this trigger, go in the details, scroll down, and find on begin overlap, and then pop it in. We're then going to use this one. So we're checking to see if the trigger is overlapped by anything. So one thing you might ask right now is like, what is it? Just the player, or is it anything? Currently, actually, if I shoot the gun at it, it would start it up. So as long if anything overlaps this box, it's going to start moving. We can later then, there's ways to check to see, make sure it's a player. So hit compile, hit save, walk over. Ta-da! It moves up. Pretty cool. Now, just like the other one, you could do it the opposite way. You can also stop it if the player leaves it. So one of the other events, I'll go for trigger and say on end overlap. If we've reached the end of this, I will say that the moving platform will stop. So I'll bring this in and set the false, which means that this would no longer run because we only run this if it's true. Hit compile, hit save. Got both of them. Now, sorry, so I'll leave that there for a second. But what will happen is that when the player jumps on it, it'll move up, but as soon as the player leaves, it's going to stop. As soon as I jump back on it, it'll start up again. All right, I will hit play. I'll move up. Let it move. I will then jump on top here. It's holding still. If I go back down on it and step on it again, starts up again, starts moving, but I get off, it stops moving. Oh, now, let me get on here. And I'll move up again. Oh, thank you for the follow. Cool, cool, cool. All right, so that gives us most of it. So this is, again, all in with basically variables and little blueprint functions. We've created the basic setup for moving a platform. And again, if you have questions later on, or effectively if you're watching this as a recording, I put all my recordings up on Twitch and YouTube. JDE will also have those videos as well. If you ever have questions, jump in the Discord and ask me a question about the videos, like, hey, I want to be able to do this, or I'm not sure what you did here. Could you explain this? By all means. Love those questions. All right. Now, the next thing I want to do, let's make sure, okay, no questions in chat. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to show you an alternative way of doing this. So just like anything else, this is one way. I'm going to show you an alternative way. So what we're going to do is, what I want you to do is that we'll save this here. Actually, instead of, we'll keep this elevator as, maybe you'll like this one. I'm going to create a second type of elevator. So let's duplicate this elevator. So I'm going to close this one down. I will duplicate this and call this elevator underscore timeline. So this will be an elevator done with a timeline. And I'll drag this guy out. Move the point 1 up to here. So this is going to behave a little bit differently. And I'm also going to use an entirely different system, which again might give you ideas on other ways you could use it. So I'll create another type of object. So I have elevator, and now I have an elevator timeline. A similar structure, but I'm going to change some things up. So I'm going to open up the elevator timeline. Dock them here. Now, make sure you have the elevator timeline up. We'll leave the others. Again, anything I work on today will also be up on the drive, so you can download later. And I'm going to break this off tick. So we're going to break this off. You're going to effectively no longer have this in tick. I'll leave this here so you can take a look, but I'm going to leave that there. Next, I'm also going to break these two guys, because I'm going to run this entire movement with just these two events using a Unreal feature, which is called a timeline. Now, what you're going to do here is right-click out in the open and type in the word new, or actually just type in the word timeline. Oh yeah, it's add timeline, not new timeline. So type in the word timeline, one word, and you should see an option that looks like it has a clock on it. Click that, and you should get something that looks like this. Give it a name. We'll call this elevator. Sorry, elevator movement. Something like that. So, all what a timeline is, more or less, is effectively a stopwatch. It says it will effectively start, run, and then stop. And what it's going to do while you're doing that is that it's going to output something. In this case, we're just going to output a number. It's going to keep outputting the number between, effectively for us, it's going to count from 0 all the way up to 1. I'm going to see why here in a second. Now, let me draw. Okay, so we'll do this part first. So, what this play is going to do, it's going to sound like more kind of like an event, or effectively basically like an animation. It's kind of going to be like that. So what we're going to say is this elevator move is going to have a play, and then effectively run, and then stop. When it runs, it's going to move the platform, and then stops, it stops. So once you have this here, I want you to double click and jump in. You're going to see a blank window. Nothing's going to be here. Now, what I want you to click is this add float track. And you should get a grid looking thing. And it'll ask you for a name. We'll call this time. We'll just call this time. Now, we're going to change the length of this to 1. So change the length to 1. Then, in this open area, so I'm going to tell you what to do, and then I'm going to explain what the hell I'm doing. Sorry, I'm going to explain what I'm doing. Hit the add button. So, sorry, let me look at that again. Right-click and go, right-click in this open gray area, and click Add Key to Curve Float. You should now get this orange little diamond-looking thing. Now, what we're going to do is create 2 points, which will create a line segment. And we'll see why we're going to use that. So create 2 of them. One I'll put here, and then create another one that's to the right. You should get something that looks like this. We just need 2 of these points. Now, the first one is going to be, I want you to set the time to start at 0, and the value will also be 0. Then select the second one. This time is going to be at 1, and the value will be at 1. I'll zoom out. You can zoom out with your mouse wheel. Oops. Put that back as 1. Put that back as 1. Whoa. So it should look like that. Just a line that goes from 0 up to 1, straight line. Now, I'm going to then flip over my whiteboard and explain what am I actually doing here. Okay. Move to a different part of the whiteboard. Okay. So we've understood so far that we have a line. We can create a vector. And more or less how we're doing it is that we're actually moving, again, imagine this is the platform. We're moving it a little bit each frame in the direction we want it to go. Little by little. Now, there's an alternative way you can pull off movement. this is effectively, we were going to use, this is again, we'll say this is vector movement. This is another type called lerp. Now, this is actually, again, a fairly advanced function here, but lerp stands for linear interpolation. Fancy word, don't worry about it. All this fancy word means is that instead of imagining that I'm moving them a little bit each frame, I'm going to imagine a single line, not even a vector, just a single line between them. I am then going to break this line up into sections. These sections will represent time, hence timeline. So this, let's say that we have, lerps are usually, again, 90% of the time always between 0 and 1. So 0 and 1. 0 is where I started. If I reach 1, I am at the end of the timeline. So, for example, this would be like 0.5, this would be 0.25, this would be 0.75. So just imagine that effectively we're cutting off, taking a line that represents from 0 to 1 and cutting up into little slices. Now what lerp will do is effectively more or less teleport that line across those segments. So what we're going to do is have that platform match effectively where it is in time between 0 and 1. Now I can change these seconds later, but we're going to basically use this as between 0 and 1. So at every one frame, he's just going to move little by little across this line. And more or less teleport, because we're breaking it up in little sections. Which is hence why it looks like this. So you kind of have to use your imagination here. But you can see this is Unreal. You'll even see an example of this on Unreal's website as well. But imagine this line is the line between, sorry, get a little flicker with my, hold on. Swap this out. Sorry, I'm having an issue with one of my monitors. Try that. There we go. All right. So imagine this line as the platform, and this is where he starts, and this is where he's going to end. Not literal movement, but it's effectively between 0 and 1. That's where he's moving from. So, in doing so, this guy, we're going to use this little timeline because we can actually have fun with this timeline. We can have it like curve and slope because we can make this line kind of go, again, wavy if we want, which I'll show you how here in a bit. Also, one last thing, I want you to put up use last keyframe. Just turn that on because I want it to actually end on the actual one, not right before it. So we'll leave that there. So again, all you have to do for this setup is just create a line between 0 and 1. Once that's done, here's what we're going to do. You're going to bring out this, I want you to right click in this open area and type in the word lerp, L-E-R-P, and pick the one that has the vector on it. Now, it says it wants an A and a B. Now, the way to think of this is that you need to give it where the platform originally started, which is important, not where the platform is currently at, but where you originally started and where do you want it to go. So in this case, where he started, we'll say is more or less actually where point 2 is. So point 2 should be at 0, 0, 0, which sure, we'll keep it there. You can change it whatever you want, but I'm going to represent point 2 is going to be his starting point. This is going to be his end point for this first element. So point 1 is where I'm going, which I need to get point 1's location, which actually I'm going to drag this off as a sequence. Actually, yeah. No, we don't need it as a sequence. We could just do it in one line. I'm going to do get world location. Point 1. Where I'm starting is at point 2, which is right where the original one was, and say get world location. Then we'll say end. So A is where you start, B is where it ends, and alpha represent time. Work wants to work between 0 and 1. So if you even notice when you highlight it, interpolates, which is effectively a fancy word that we're teleporting across this line, between 0 and 1. So if alpha is 0, we are right on top of A. If alpha is 1, we are right on top of B. So we're going to take that time, the variable that we create in there. So remember how I told you to call this track time, the track name? That's where that comes from. So this little green one should be a float. Drag that into there. So what this will do is that we're just moving across this line. So instead of moving in a direction, we're moving across the line. Once that's done, we're then going to say, we're going to get the platform, and we're going to set his world location. So we're not offsetting it, we're setting exactly where we want it to be. Because unlike a vector, which is moving them, we're actually kind of teleporting it. Because the start point is right at the bottom at point 2, the end point is point 1. So he's going to move up to that point. And then hit compile. So that's more or less how it's going to look for right now. Then, all you have to do with the timeline is start it once, and then it'll start running. So all you have to do here is just say, on begin overlap, we're going to hit play. It's then going to play, which means it's going to effectively start at 0 and move along this line, which we are then using that number from 0 to 1 to represent where we are at on that line. So we start off at point 2, and we move toward point 1. Which I know is confusing by the naming, but if you just take a look, point 2 is right at the bottom of this square. That's how I set this one, and point 1's above them. So once that's done, I'm just going to double check. I'll begin overlap, boom, hits play, hit world location, boom, boom, boom. That looks good. Now, if I hit play, I should be able to step on them. Same thing occurs. And it moves me up. It'll move me up in this case, it doesn't move up by a arbitrary speed value. This moves up by how big that timeline is. So in this case, no matter how far away it is, it's going to get there in 1 second, no matter what. These guys move by more or less an arbitrary speed value. This guy is going to move by whatever the length of that timeline is, which we can change. I'll show you how. Now here's the cool part. There's a lot of options here. I can play from the start, so if I effectively play from the start, it would start at the bottom again and go all the way up. Play will just keep playing effectively all the way until it ends. On end overlap, what I'm going to do is actually use the reverse here. So on play, if I step on this platform, it's going to start moving up. As soon as I leave, it's going to reverse the timeline, so it's going to start walking backwards, which would make the elevator go right back down to where it started. So you get this effect, which is now more or less like maybe an elevator I would like. Is I jump on this platform and move up. If I get off, it moves right back down. Pretty cool. Now, if you want it to go slower, all you have to do is just change what that time is. I forget if this one also changes it, but I have to double check. I don't think that I think that changes this value. But if I change the length of this to, let's say, I want it to happen over 5 seconds or 3 seconds, I would change it to 3. And then I'd want the second point to value at, I would want basically still keep value as 1. So value is always going to stay as 1. This guy's value is always going to stay at 0. So value 1, and I'll say time happens at 5. Or sorry, 3. The length of this was 3. So now this will move at a slower pace and over 3 seconds, and it will approach 1. Because 0 and 1 represents the starting location, and 1 represents the end location. So if I run this now, it will do the same thing, but it will arrive there in 3 seconds. So, pretty cool elevator. All right, so those are some different flavors. So giving you a whole bunch of different flavors for creating a moving platform. Again, pick apart the pieces, create different ways of doing it. Again, take a look. If you have any questions on it, let me know. But now you can create some moving platforms that the player could play around with. Now, again, some of the stuff we'll learn you can also bring back to the platform, but now we're going to create a new type of situation. We're going to create a door. And we're going to build a new room so we can start building towards our adventure game. So I want to build more stuff. All right, so here's what we're going to do. So this is how I'm going to structure it. I'm going to create more or less a hole in this wall and create a big new empty room that I want to just more or less jump in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move this wall out of the way because I'm going to get rid of them. Don't want it. Then, if you remember from last week, I'm going to grab a BSP tool. So I'm going to go to geometry, and I'm going to go to box. So this box is, again, unlike a regular cube. So this is a regular cube. Unlike a regular cube, this guy can be manipulated in different ways. I can kind of add more verts, stretch different points, do a whole bunch of cool things. So I want this one to create my new little hole in the wall. So what I'm going to do is put him more or less at the edge, somewhere right there. That seems about right. Then, so this was under, by the way, the modes tab. If you don't see it there, if you go to window, I thought it was under here somewhere. Oh, there it is. Editor modes and click modes panel. That should bring it up. And then I'm going to go to geometry. And then I'm going to select box, which would then give me this box that you see here, if you drag it into the scene. I also like to keep things organized. So inside my hierarchy, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this doorway 1. I'm going to drag this box brush into it. So I like to keep things organized. So I'll bring this in. Now, once I have this guy in, there's this little, the last one on the end of the tab called geometry editing, which we need to flip to that mode in order to manipulate this box. So I'm going to flip this to geometry editing. Now I can select the sides of the faces and stretch this to where I want. So I can select this one, stretch it out here. Not going to be picture perfect, but good enough for government work. Stretch that there. Select the top face, bring it up. Alright, that one's alright. I can work with that. Now maybe I'll bring the bottom face down a little bit. Okay, that looks good. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add another box brush and then cut a hole out of that. Because with the BSP tools, you can effectively basically cut away at each other. So what I'm going to do is go back to modes, go back to place, go back to geometry, and create another cube. Drop another cube in the scene. Then, actually I'll keep modes here for a second. Actually, no, what I want is I'm going to have this box here. I'm going to put it in my doorway so I know where it's at. I'm going to rename this, I'm going to call it sub box brush. So this is going to represent a subtractive box brush. So you have additive, which is the ones you see, or I can flip it to subtractive, which allows me to cut things out of other boxes. So I'm going to call them sub so I know what this one is. I'm going to go to details. Now if you go to details, scroll down, there's brush settings, and the one I'm going to select is subtractive. And you'll see it turn invisible, which is fine, because what it will do is that if I move this over, and now I'm going to cut a hole in the wall. Which then I can also do, I can either, whoa, come back here. I can either go in the geometry editing mode and cut it this way. Oops. Got a big enough hole in the wall. Or I could just do this in regular gizmo mode if I want. All I need you to do is just make a big enough hole in the wall. It's going to represent our little large door. Oh, that's all right. So effectively what we're going to do is create a little doorway, and a door that when I approach it, the door will open, which will allow me to travel through into our next level. Which, by the way, I'm going to create our next level, or sorry, next room. So I'm going to create another folder. I'll call this room 2. I'm going to create another geometry one, because we're going to move into an enclosed space. I'm going to drag another box in. Put this over here. I'm going to go to my details. I'm going to go to my brush settings. I'm going to make this hollow. What hollow does is makes this thing effectively have an inside. So it's not just an empty box, but it effectively has an inner space as well. So let's make it move a little bit farther out here. I want this to be a very big room that we're going to play with. Alright, cool. Now what we're going to do, that seems to be good. We're going to then, I'll put that in room 2. I'm going to go back to our doorway and go to that sub brush and make it a little bit wider. Oh, do I have the order wrong? Let me, again, I'm a little bit new with geometry brushes, so let me create that again. So I'm going to drop in here, wonder if there's an order into that. I'm going to go back to here, I'm going to say it's subtractive, bring it up, there it goes. Oh, I guess there is an order to these ones. There must be a setting that I didn't realize. But, so I deleted the subtractive brush and then created a new one, now it's going through both. So I gotta read up to see how that works again. Level building isn't my forte, but I can do enough. There we go. Alright, good enough. Should be able to then move into this next room. Alright, cool. Now the next part is creating a door for this. So we're going to create a door. So for the time remaining, we got 30 minutes. We can create at least the basic setup for this door. And we'll use the timeline again. So we're going to create a brand new blueprint. So this one's going to be brand new. So I'm going to right click in that content browser. I'm going to right click, say create blueprint. This is going to be a type actor. And I'm going to call this door. Maybe I'll give it a different, fancier name later. But I can only come up with door right now. Now, if you downloaded my project, or at least one of the ones previously, I put in a whole bunch of assets, which these assets are free on the Epic Store. So the one I'm using is this one. Give me a moment, I'll bring up the asset list. So on the marketplace, this is for free. If you search the marketplace under Epic Games free content, there's one called a modular sci-fi season 1 starter bundle. So it's a whole bunch of free, very nice looking assets that we can use. So I downloaded into this project. You can add it yourself as well, that we're going to use here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a static mesh. So we're going to create a door frame and a door. So I'm going to go to add component. I'm going to do a static mesh. So static mesh is effectively, a mesh is again, mesh is a model, effectively a static looking object scene. Static means is that it's not dynamic, it's not going to change into weird shapes as it's running. Think of a building, or in this case a door. It's going to keep a shape for the game. So that's what we're using here. I'm going to call this one the door frame. Now, in the asset list, there's one called doorway. I think it's doorway SM underscore doorway underscore large. So, which we'll talk about here in a bit. There's effectively a naming convention most of the time when you work in different engines. Unreal quite often effectively puts in what the type of object is first, underscored followed by its name. So like a blueprint is BP underscore, like our door, BP underscore moving platform. Static mesh is SM underscore whatever the name of the mesh is. So I'm going to click the SM door large. I think if Unreal didn't crash on me. Oh, there we go. Perfect. There's my doorway. That's what I want. Now, the next one we're going to do is I'm going to add another static mesh, which will be a child of that thing. So I'm going to make this, and this will be the actual door. So I have my door frame, which I selected. Sorry, if you didn't see that, I might have skipped over that. In the door frame, once I create static mesh, over here there's an option called static mesh. Click the drop down and look for SM underscore doorway underscore L. That's the one I picked. Then for door, I'm going to do the same. So if there's a doorway, there's also a door. So SM underscore door underscore L, which is the matching one for this one. Once I place it here, I'm going to move him over so he's more or less in line with the door. So you might have to kind of hand place this, but that looks all right. Now, what we're going to do is have fun, is that we're going to raise the door up when the player approaches. Hit compile. All right, so now that I have my two objects, we're going to do very similar to what we did with the elevator. So I'm going to go to the event graph. Now, what we need, which is different from this, is that we need to have a way. So actually, let's just create the timeline part, and we'll just do that on begin play and just have them run the animation. Then we're going to hook it up with the collision. So let's do this. So we'll add it right here for begin play first, and then we'll hook it up correctly. So what we're going to do, we're going to use the timeline since it's quicker. We're going to do add timeline, which you're going to select the one that looks like it has the clock symbol. Do this, and we're going to call this door animation, or door timeline. That's actually more fun. It's not. This is not technically an animation. It just is a time. It's a timeline. So once we create said timeline, I'm going to jump into here, open it up. We're going to create a new track, so a new flow track. We're going to call this door time, line, and any name will do, doesn't matter. 5 seconds will do. Make sure you turn off last keyframe because I want it to make sure it hits the end of the actual line. Then I'm going to right click in this open area. We'll have that 2 keys, key 1 and key 2. Key 1 will be at time 0, at value 0. And the second one needs to be whatever the length that you have set, which we're going to say is 5. And value is 1. So no matter what, again, so whoops. And then I'll zoom out. No matter what, the time, the value, and for each of these keys will always be the same. Make this one 0, make this one 1. For the purpose we're using, we're always going to keep that way. The only thing that's going to change is what the time is on the second one. Hit compile. Now we got that. Back to event graph. Perfect. Now we got more or less that. Now we need to create 2 points for the door to go between. So let's create 2 points for the door to go between. So this is, so the door starts here, and I want it to end more or less, let's say, right about there. Now, one way is that we could actually just copy the values here. That could work. So actually, yeah, let's try that, just as something different. So in creating new points, we'll just copy the values. All right. So that's something different. Okay, so what you see here is that currently the door starts at negative 770, 40. Oh, actually, you know what? Let's actually do it as points because I forgot. We want to have some control lower in the scene. Maybe we want the door to higher. It's easier than just trying to adjust these numbers. So let's create a scene component. Now this scene component, make sure it's a child of the root of the object. Make sure it's not a child of the door. I don't want this thing to be a child of the door. It could be a child of the door frame, and that could be fine, but not the door. Because if it's a child of the door, when the door moves, the starting point's also going to move, which is bad. I'm going to say this is start point. Now, you're going to make sure the start point starts exactly at the same spot door does. So make sure more or less those two values are the same. So start point is negative 770, 40, 0, and so is this one. So they're both sitting on the same position. Then I'll right click and duplicate this. I'll create an endpoint. And for endpoint, I will move him up. So somewhere up above. Now I want to be able to see this thing, so what I'm going to do is add a component to the endpoint so I can see it in the scene of the editor. So I'm going to do add component billboard, which gives me a little symbol I could see in the scene. So it gives us a little raptor head, or T-Rex, I'm not even sure what it is. So we'll leave that there, but now I'll be able to see the scene. So if I go to the actual map, I should, oh, sorry. Let's say goodbye, we'll hit save. Let's actually drag our new door into the game. We haven't even dragged it in yet. So once I have save, I have all that. I'm going to bring this guy into the scene. Perfect. Now we have a door. So I'm going to have a door more or less lined up for the rest of it. Now the door is more or less correct. I kind of want to leave it as is. What I might do is go to the subtractive box brush and shrink him down a bit and make it more or less even with the door. Alright, seems about right. I'll go in and get a little bit more finesse later. But now I have my little door, my little blaster door. So now it's in the scene. Cool. Alright, got both of those. That looks good. Now let's actually make the behavior because we want to see this door go up and down. There's the endpoint, by the way. So there's especially where I want it to go. Save, okay. Alright, so let's go in here. We're going to do more or less what we did with the other one. We're going to do alert function. So we'll say alert between two vectors. I need to give it the start point, which I have. So start point, get world location. Now you can't do this with a local location. You just have to change a couple lines. But I'll deal with world right now and just try not to confuse everybody. And then we'll get world location. Boom. Attach it. So this is my start. That's my end. And that's my time. Perfect. Now once that's done, then we will grab the door out here. So not the frame, but the door itself. And set world location, which will be exactly this one. And then we will say update. And that's more or less it. Now we can try this out. on begin play, even though this is not my end goal, what I want to do, but we will try this out here on begin play. I play, watch it, and there's the door going up. Oh, that's pretty cool. It's going up really high. We might need to lower that, but yeah, we might need to lower that a bit. So, Mr. Endpoint, you will go down to, let's say, right about here. See how that looks. Oh, much better. And I also might hide this a little bit, so maybe I'll actually make him go out just a little bit more. So I'm going to hide the door. So I'm basically going to hide you seeing the door go up into the wall. Cool. All right, that's looking pretty cool. All right. Now we actually wanted to get it more appropriate. So what we're going to do is create a system, even though next week we'll actually make a button to open the door. But what we're going to do now is that if the player gets within range of the door will start going up. So we're going to do it by this, which is pretty cool. So now that we have this scene, what we're going to do is create, just like in the other one, create a box collision that will represent the area that the player needs to be in order for that door to open. So we could do this with a box or a sphere. It's either one. So let's say we do a box first. So I'm going to drag a box, and we're going to call this the door trigger. So if the player steps in this trigger, the door is going to open. Now what you want to do is make it sizable. I'm going to have it cover both sides, so the player's near it on either side of the door. It'll detect it. So that seems about right for right now. I'll hit compile. Boom. Now if I go in the scene, I just want to see if it's actually there. Boom, there it is. So all the player has to do is actually just get within range of this, go inside this box, and if so, the door's going to open. Cool. So then all we have to do is just one last thing. And instead of on begin play, we're going to break that. We're going to say on the trigger, so select trigger, scroll down on details. We need the overlap, so I'm going to select overlap, bring him up here. I need the overlap and the end overlap. Selecting again, and there's end overlap. On play, door will go up. If the player leaves it, the door is going to close. So it's very similar to how we did the elevator. But now it's going to look like a door. So now that I hit play, it'll run up in here, get close to the door. Hey, and then the door starts opening. Now I can enter the room. And if I go away, the door will close. And I think the ball might open. Well, I was wondering if the ball opens it. It does not. But the player will open it. All right, very cool. Okay, so now we've done effectively several different types of events today. Okay, so I think this is where I'll probably end it for today. So on next Friday, we're going to keep adding stuff to this door. We're going to create like a little button for us to open said door. And then we're also going to play around more with that on collision, the on overlap stuff. So we'll actually play a little bit more with that. So creating more events by us touching stuff, interacting with stuff, and doing a lot of cool things. And then at, maybe not next week, but in the following ones, we'll also create our ability to actually pick up a block and place it where we want. So I want to be able to create some puzzles. So one of the puzzles we're going to make early on is pick up blocks. I need to place the block in a location. If I do, the door will open. I can go to the next room. So I think that sounds like fun. That's something we can definitely do. All right. So is there any questions? So thank you for those who came out today. We got, again, a lower number than usual, but that's all right. Again, the recordings will be up on Twitch and YouTube and the YouTube page. It's also on the JDE YouTube page as well. So there's multiple locations where you can find it, these videos. If you need more, let me know. I think the link to the YouTube pages are also in my Twitch panel below. If there's no more questions from folks today, I'm going to stick around a bit, just close some things up. I'll upload what we did today up into Google Drive, where you can download and play with some more. If you have more questions you'd like to touch on, by all means. And again, JDE wanted me to let you know is that, again, if there are DePaul students in the chat right now and interested in becoming part of the JDE group, they're looking for new board members for the new year. So we have some that are graduating, so they're looking for new members that want to help out and join. Again, it's a great group, and it's a great way to get into the game development scene in Chicago. So, again, thank you everybody that came out today. Again, if there's any questions, let me know, and I hope to see you all next week. Awesome. So I will stick around here for a second. I'll watch the chat, see if there's any messages. But thank you everybody for coming out.